Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. So this week we have a lot to talk about. We have, of course, Guilds of Ravnica, and the first look at the standard from Guilds of Ravnica, because as you may know, MTGO is always a week ahead, so you get to play everything online way before it's even legal in paper, and a meta already has started to appear on MTGO, as well as there are drafts on MTGO and MTG Arena, so people are starting to get to the gist of what cards are good from the Guilds of Ravnica and how they pair with other cards. And then we have a few price spikes to talk about. One of them you see before you, which is Walking Ballista. And also, we had a bomb drop on us today, which Battlebond has a restock. Now, there is a bit of an argument about how big that restock is. From my end of things, it looks to be quite substantial because as a small store, I'm able to order a lot more than I'm usually able to order from even in-stock sets. So when Unstable had a restocking, for example, we only had access to a few per week. And Battlebond, it seems to be quite deep. So I've talked to some other people, though, saying that the supply is not nearly as high as Battlebond. So we're going to talk about that in a second here. But let's talk about Walking Ballista. So you can see that Walking Ballista has gone from flattened out at the $12, mainly because of the Challenger decks, as the Challenger decks were very, very worth it just to buy and piece together when you could rely on like a $20 Chandra at the time, like a $10 Hazaret, a $15 Walking Ballista, a $5 Fatal Push, and you put all that together and you could just piece out the Challenger decks. Well, now it seems to me that people forgot that the Challenger decks are still very much in stock. And so if a card like Walking Ballista actually does spike up in value, it might actually be okay to speculate into, or not speculate, to piece out the Challenger decks, sell the Chandras, the Fatal Pushes, the Field of Runes, the Search, or the Settle the Wreckages, and coop back your money that way, and then just have Walking Ballista as the profit margin. Currently, they're actually selling for a bit higher. Market prices is, both of these are slow, because I know I sold some for $25 a piece, so that's the market price of Walking Ballista. They're going crazy. Card Kingdom, let's see if they even have them in stock anymore at their $16 price tag. Looks like they've bumped them up to $20, so this is a little bit lagging behind, and they've sold 2 since their restock at $20. So how Card Kingdom does it is they restock, put it back up to $8, and then every time it sells out, they bump up their price. See if their buy list has also increased to the $13 margin for Walking Ballista. So you can definitely see that the prices are lagging behind on the Ballista. All right, so what do I think about Walking Ballista? Well, first of all, it sees play in a lot of decks, all the way from Vintage to Modern to Legacy and even Commander. It is right now seeing play in the Hardened Scales Affinity, which is the flavor of the month on Modern, which that is subject to change. I think the Hardened Scales Affinity gets shut down pretty hard by hate cards like Stony Silence, but actually it does a pretty well job of fighting through other hate cards that traditionally give Affinity an issue. So a lot of the old school Affinity decks have moved over to Hardened Scales Affinity. I used to play this deck a long time ago. It's a good meta call, but it's actually pretty bad when the meta is very hostile towards kind of a kind of a go wide strategy, which a lot of times this Hardened Scale Affinity turns into. For that deck, I don't know if I like Walking Ballista going forward if you're banking just on the Hardened Scales. Now you can see that it sees play from time to time in things like Mono Green Tron and Amulet Titan. It looks like even Mono Blue Tron, Bridgevine, lots of things can utilize the Walking Ballista. However, the standard is rotating out, and what I've seen at my store, a lot of people have started to sell me, especially the standard players, their Walking Ballistas back because they're breaking down their old counter surge decks, or what we call the Winding Constrictor Walking Ballista combo decks. It's a lot of times the mono greens would throw in Walking Ballista, mono black would throw in Walking Ballista. Dimir Control here, you can see had Walking Ballista in it before. Sometimes I've seen it in like white black vehicles or just white-black aggro. And then it was in vehicles at a time. So, I mean, people have held on to their standard players have held on to their walking ballistas, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of those are going to get back into the system of the people that just don't play Modern. So, usually after rotation, you start to see any card that saw any sort of play in Standard start to go down. However, like I said, I think this is more of a speculation than anything. I think that someone felt like it's a good idea to buy out the walking ballistas, as going forward they think it could be something like the with the Eldritch Moon, the Collective Brutality, or something like Kolgan's Command, that long term can either hold its value or continue to go up in price. I think the biggest difference between like Walking Ballista and say Collective Brutality is Collective Brutality started seeing play in a ton of Modern decks at a particular time period when Burn was very, very popular, and it was a very good card to kind of answer what Burn did in any sort of deck that had black in it. And now I'm thinking that we could see a resurgence in a card like Collective Brutality, but anyway, that's a story for another day. However, I'm thinking that Walking Ballista isn't from like a set like Eldritch Moon. This is a set with masterpieces in it that was open very heavily for those masterpieces. Aether Revolt was a very good set for EV for quite some time, and so I'm thinking that the amount of supply out there for Walking Ballista is huge. Yes, it does have it going for it that it's not in Kaladesh, because Kaladesh was just by far massively opened, but Aether Revolt isn't too far off. In fact, for a second set in the past 3, 4, 5 years, I think it'd be the most popular second set. If you compare it to Hour Devastation, not a comparison. Compare it to Rivals of Ixalan, not a comparison. Eldritch Moon, not a comparison. Possibly Oath of the Gatewatch, but I think Aether Revolt was probably even open more than something like Oath of the Gatewatch. So it has a lot of things going against it to hold that $22 price tag, especially since it has seen a print in a supplemental product, and the supplemental product has a ton of supply out there. Like I said, I can still basically order unlimited amounts of Challenger decks at a very reasonable price, and then break these down if something like the Walking Ballista continues to go up in value. I don't know where that price point is, where it makes it worthwhile, but all the other cards in the Challenger decks you might expect to see a hit because of people doing the exact same thing we did. In fact, today, instead of trying to sell the Counter Surge deck, we broke down the rest of the Counter Surge decks we had, found the Walking Ballista, and just sold it immediately on TCG Player. So, if I'm doing it, I'm sure other stores are likewise following suit. Alrighty, that's enough about Walking Ballista. Let's talk about Battlebond. Battlebond is a set that everyone thought was done being printed. There was no communication from Wizards. This is one of my pet peeves. Wizards just kind of throws these things at us. We didn't expect this coming. A lot of people I talked to really thought that Battlebond was done because they didn't want to do what Conspiracy and Conspiracy 2 happened with those when they restocked them and then no one wanted them and they sat on the shelves for 2 years and then finally were purchased like 2 years later. That's exactly what happened with Conspiracy 1. You could order that 2-3 years in MSRP, or actually not MSRP, distributor pricing for just a multiple years after it was printed. Same thing with Conspiracy. And Wizards typically doesn't like products to stagnate like that. And we have the fall season coming up, the Christmas season coming up, and Battlebond is just going to have to compete with a bunch of other products they're putting out. So I guess Wizards decided, though, that it was worthwhile that this set was a hit, and rather try to bank on a bunch of unknown sets, this might be the best route to go. So I think that they then reprinted it, and now we are getting a pretty decent reprinting of the set. I'm expecting this to be going on Sports and More and Amazon quite soon. As I said in the intro to this, the supply, at least on my end of what I can see, seems to be quite high. It definitely isn't very, very low, like some of the rumors out there have been saying. So, where does that put us with Battlebond? I called on my second channel on the Rogue Market, one of the cards that I was investing in, like True Name Nemesis. There are a lot of good targets here that I've been looking at. The other one is the Mystic Confluence. Cards like even Greater Good. I think all of those were about ready to hit their lows and start going up in value. Greater Good, Diabolical Intent, Mystic Confluence. These ones right here see a ton of play in Commander. Even cards like Spire Garden. These are an auto-include basically in every Commander deck that runs these color combinations. So with more supply, though, I think that's going to stave off the growth of all of these, and you're going to start to see these red arrows continue to outnumber the green arrows as the supply starts to get more into the into the player's hands. Spell Snare is another one people have been talking about investing in. I think that you might need to hold off or at least really lower what you're getting the Spell Snares for going forward. Alrighty, so another interesting thing with Battlebond that piqued my interest is go check out the buy list, the mysterious buy list prices of particular vendors like Card Kingdom. About a week ago, they more than a week ago, about 2 weeks ago, they said they started downplaying or downgrading their buy list, which I find very interesting that somehow these stores knew about this second wave coming before the rest of us did. It's a very fine line to walk. What is unethical and what is illegal for Wizards of the Coast to be giving companies heads up for these type of things. I don't have any just damning evidence of such things, but you start to, you've been in business for this long, you start to realize that there's a pattern with a lot of these vendors that seem to be just ahead of the curve on reprints or no reprints. And I mean, look at the Cyclonic Rift, where Card Kingdom mysteriously increased their buy list to higher than the TCG player market price. And lo and behold, not only did it miss the Commander reprinting, it also missed the Guild Pack reprinting. So I'm just putting it out there. You can draw your own conclusions. But this is very suspect at this point. I mean, sometimes you can predict something very correctly. You can go on a lucky streak for a while, but every stinking time it seems like that these things, they are not getting burned by either speculating into something that's reprinted or not specking into something, or specking into something that doesn't get a reprint. So, or did I say that twice in a row? Anyway, you get the gist. So that's enough about Battlebond. Battlebond has a current expected value of $2.53 per pack, which is incredibly high based upon other sets of this time period. Of course, this is where you have to, so it means it is profitable for mass box openers. If they can get it at $80 a booster box, it probably is still profitable up to about the $85-$90. If you're willing to do the work, you will make a slight margin. So if you're getting packs for $2.11 or $2.15 or $2.25, 25 cents per pack, you're opening up 1,000 packs. There's your $250 profit margin there. Yeah, but I mean, fees are going to really cut into that too. I don't know. That is usually, of course, I don't like to really do mass box opening until that number goes a lot higher. So anyway, I guess market price is still $3.29. That's not too terrible if you can compensate for the fees. So keep that in mind with Battlebond. This should probably go down as well as we get to see exactly the supply of this. If you see it on Amazon, you definitely know you're in trouble. I've been hearing from a lot of people that Walmarts have restocked Battlebond as well. I'm going to have to go check my local Walmart to see if that is correct. I know our Walmart doesn't stock a lot of Magic the Gathering. That's one thing I'm proud of, that we have ran Walmart out of business, at least for the majority of Magic. Before we started our store, they had an entire shelf dedicated to Magic, and now they have a little tiny section of a shelf that has a few Magic products on it. So anyway, let's get back to the nuts and bolts of this Market Monday. Let's talk about the new standard meta and where, if any, there's potential investments. So let's look for here. This is the first Commander Standard League that just happened on MTGO with the new restrictions. And it's got a card that I was going to call earlier that if you've played it in the pre-release, you just saw how much of a blowout that card is. We'll talk about it in a second, and it never has a bad mode. I like these. It's a split card. You can see it on your screen right here, so I'm giving it away. But split cards in general seem to be insanely good in the pre-release because the modes were always, a lot of them had like a mode. It's like, okay, if I need to cantrip it, I can. Or if I even need to get a little bit of value out of it, I can. And it's these type of things. I think that they finally found like a good split mechanic that has worked with Guilds of Ravnica. So there are a few other cards that I'm thinking that we'll talk about if they didn't hit the list that I think are much more powerful than people gave credit for. And I mean, let's just look right now. Let's look at the current prices of Guilds of Ravnica. So Guilds of Ravnica has the most expensive card being Assassin's Trophy. That is a $25 card. We also had a huge price increase of this March of the Multitudes. But Assassin's Trophy, of course, is starting to see a lot of play. It has pretty much replaced Abrupt Decay. I don't know how I feel about that in Modern because I think people are going to learn really fast that blue decks or blue tempo decks can definitely prey on Jund now if they don't have an uncounterable way to take care of something. So Assassin's Trophy can be spell snared, of course Abrupt Decay can't. Assassin's Trophy definitely will come down at the $25 mark. It's one of those cards that's kind of awkward in Standard because there's some decks that you don't want to be ramping up your opponent at the same time. I mean, so you have to like use your Assassin's Trophy off curve. You're using it, turn 4, turn 5 to really take care of a threat, but that's still not a bad trade-off. March of the Multitudes is a card that I definitely was going to tell everyone to buy into because of it being a sleeper. If you ever played this in the pre-release, this is just and I started playing it in the Singleton on Arena, and this card was so insanely easy to enable and just make a ton of tokens. So, I mean, I think I was like turn 4, turn 5, and was able to create like 7 or 8 tokens because of using Saprolings to create other tokens, and then just pumping all the Saprolings into even more tokens, and then playing something like Pride of Conquerors to finish off the game. So this is, I think, one of the more competitive instant speed mythics in the set, so that's no surprise that this has had a massive increase. The Doom Whisperer is still really, really powerful. There are, in a Surveil deck, it's fun to use the other Whisperer. I can't remember what the other Whisperer is called, the 1/3, that whenever you Surveil the first time per turn, you put a counter. Or no, you don't put a counter, you drain a life. And there is the wall that you put a counter. And so Doom Whisperer can semi-go infinite with it. I mean, you can Surveil enough to then make that attack in. But, I mean, it's just a very value creature. This is very similar to not Linval. What's the angel out of Dominaria? The 5/5 lifelink angel. It's a 6/6 for 5, so it's undercosted, flying trample. Extremely good there, and has an upside to Surveil to really set up all your draws going forward. So it also has a lot of good synergy with the Blood Collective or Blood Collector or Blood something. And I just really, out of all the mechanics that I think potentially could see Standard play, Surveil is one of them. That you could just make a dedicated Surveil deck and be competitive. Pelt Collector also had a massive buyout. This also was expected, as Experiment 1 was an uncommon that got up to the $2 mark when it was out of the last Ravnica block, and this is a rare. So of course, if a card uncommon can get up around the $2-3 mark, that means the rare is usually around I'd say the $5 to $10 mark. I think this price will come back down to earth going forward. A lot of people have been putting this in an Elf Tribal. Apparently, Elf Tribal actually even works right now in Standard, and a lot of other people are just using this in a Stompy, both of which are acceptable. Fatal Push out of the way. It's a very, very acceptable card. There's only a few cards like Shock and Deadweight that can kill it early, and then it requires more to kill it later. So I do like Pet Collector. I think this was a duh. I don't know why this even pre-sold at the $1. I think I should have done a better job watching prices. So it's pre-sold for like $2. Yeah, that's just this card we'll see play. The thing is, who knows if Mono Green is going to stick around. There still is fog decks. There still is decks that can really prey on it, like black decks that can out-tempo it. Even there's a blue deck right now that seems to be doing very well against Mono Green that just puts out a threat and then controls the board, just tempos out the Mono Green. So, but week 1, when in doubt, aggro out. I think this is exactly the route that a lot of people are going. This is a very duh card, very good one-drop that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It also can see modern play. I think one of the big things is we saw whenever Seth from MTG Goldfish builds a deck, of course, cards increase in price, and now we have Seth 2.0 in the form of Magic Aids. That whenever Magic Aids does a video, then the prices of a lot of those cards do go up in value. So that is interesting about Pelt Collector, that it started going up after that video was released. He used it with a Vexing Devil deck. Definitely go check it out. Worth your time. Big fan of the channel, by the way. All right, so let's go back to Guilds of Ravnica. Not a lot of other price spikes besides those. With the Dream Eater, the other one going up in value. I think people are expecting this to be a tempo. This is one that I wasn't as impressed by. Initially, I thought this was one of the better mythics coming out because it felt the closest we had to a Torrential Gearhulk. So it basically had a Surveil 4 and a Disperse. Disperse and Surveil 4. So whatever that is worth, attached onto a 4/3. So it didn't quite have the 5/6 body, but it does have flying that the Torrential Gearhulk does. And you didn't even have to have a spell in the graveyard for it. So I'm thinking Dream Eater is a solid choice for some of these blue control decks as a 1 of or 2 of as a finisher. that can supplement to fairy or supplement what the other finisher is. So that's also expected. And we also now see the spiking up of Find a Finality. So a few other of these, you can go and definitely check through these. Maybe we'll revisit this by the end of the discussion. All right, so let's go back over the competitive standard. So the first one is a black-green. This is a black-green mid-range kind of tempo-ish deck that is going back to Vraska as really the win con and card advantage value, or you just simply tempo out your opponent with value-based cards. So the Dryad Greenseeker, this is going to make sure you never have a land off the top of your library again. Don't know how I feel about this card. I think that it's super solid in Limited. One of the best cards, Mythic Power in M19 drafts, but in Constructed, it's not as good. Fatal Push, of course, is out of the way, though. Lightning Strike is still a thing. Wizard's Lightning is still a thing. Is it worth to kill it? Is it, at that point of view, just, traded way up by getting a Lightning Strike for a Dryad Greenseeker? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I think these sort of tempo decks would rather have something like a Merfolk Branchwalker that is just strictly a more aggressive card and gets the value immediately when it comes out. So Merfolk Branchwalker, knew this was going to start seeing play. I expect this to start hitting its where it starts to outstress the supply and start to creep up more in value, because Ixalan, of course, is done being opened. It has the best set value if you're looking to actually buy booster packs, or if you have to somehow, store credit booster packs, or if tournament winnings requires you to get a booster pack, go Ixalan. It's the best bang for your buck at the moment. $1.61 is pretty significant, but I think this will start tracting back up. The Isserith the Awakener, this was a bulk rare not too long ago, so let's see if this is starting to go up. It looks pretty flat. Card Kingdom still has them for 35 cents. This is a potential spec. This is definitely something that could go up in value due to a deck like this. It's a 3/3 Death Toucher for 3. It just might just be the best in its class. I'm not sure if I like Isserith or if I like the Zombie Knight better for this particular deck. The Zombie Knight is easier on the mana base. It still doesn't die to a Plague Mare if you have to use it. And the Zombie Knight I'm talking about is whenever a non-token creature dies, you draw a card, other non-token creature. I'm thinking that might be a little better than Isserith to have Death Touch and to be able to return something back. I understand you can get a lot of value off of Merfolk Branchwalkers and Jadelight Rangers, which is coming up. In fact, I don't know if Jadelight Rangers is a better slot for this. So I don't think that this slot is solidified. We have Jadelight Ranger. This is something I really like. In fact, the deck might... I understand the Plague Mirror, and the Plague Mirror's in the sideboard, meaning that you'd have... when you bring in Plague Mirror, you'd probably have to bring out the Llanowar Elf, but I still think that like Llanowar Elf, Jadelight Ranger might be a better combination for this particular deck than like Isserith and Dryad Greenseeker. One of Plague Mare main board is going to be good versus tokens and other white decks, which I do also think are very solid right now. Even mono white aggro or even History Banality type decks are still great in the meta. And then we have kind of like what this deck is all about, which is Golgari Findbroker, which returns a permanent back to your hand, and Ravenous Chupacabra. Both of these are 2-for-1s. You leave a 3/4 body and destroy a creature with Ravenous Chupacabra. Vraska Relic Seeker just creates 2/2 pirates over and over and over, and then also is a very good creature destroying something and leaving back a treasure. And then we have the 4 of Assassin's Trophy for the go-to removal, and the Eldest Reborn. And the card I really, really like, if you've played this, I think it's if you see this in your opening pack, you always take it over basically anything. This is the pack 1, pick 1. Find Finality is such a blowout. The Find allows you to return 2 creatures from your grave to your hand. That is card advantage for 2 mana. That's usually these type of effects are 3 mana. The Finality part of it, you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, then all creatures get -4/-4. This is huge in Limited, and even in Constructed when in week 1, when there is a ton of Steel Leaf Champions and a ton of Vine Mares, and just even if look in the mirror, how will this Find Finality would do? Your Golgari Findbroker survives, everything else dies. You're now left with a 5/6 Golgari Findbroker, and you're good to go. And then last but not least, the Eldest Reborn. Eldest Reborn is one of the better removal packages right now that just screams card advantage. Huge fan of this card. So I like this deck. This is a very good version of this green-black, the rock type strategy that gets a lot of value. The sideboard it also has access to cards like Reclamation Sage, or if you want to go Thrashing Brontodon, for if artifacts and enchantments ever get big. More Plague Mirrors, Cast Downs, Deadweights, Argo's Bloodfast for the grindy, Duress for the grind matchups. Price of Fame even is in here. I don't know why that's not a Vraska's Contempt. Maybe they're bringing it versus some sort of legendary. It's surprising that there's not some sort of Vraska's Contempt in here, as the against Planeswalkers might be a little bit rough. So that's something that surprised me. All right, so another black-green. This one is going more on the lines of Azoni being a finisher and the Doom Whisper. So we have a similar type shell, except we have Llanowar Elves into Elvish Rejuvenator. Another kind of cool little thing this deck could have done instead of Dryad Greenseeker as well. I think I like that. Stitcher Supplier is also trying to get a lot of value. Druid of the Cowl is definitely just trying to ramp up. This one seems to be an all-in strategy for Azoni. Don't know how well I like that strategy. It has Vraska that then can kill the Stitcher Suppliers. But very similar removal package: Assassins, Fine Finality, the Eldest Reborn. So both these decks are similar, but different. It's funny how this one goes bigger for the Doom Whisperer, and this one kind of peters off. Feels like this one could use like a one of Doom Whisperer as well. And I don't know, that's kind of Vraska's line there. But similar still, Ravenous Chupacabras. Doesn't have the Golgari Finebrokers, but does have... Yeah, see, Golgari Finebrokers seems better in this one, with double ways to ramp into it, no ways to ramp into it here, triple ways to ramp into it, to then get something back with Stitcher Supplier. So I don't know, like a little melding of these two between the Moose Droppings and the Pig. Moose and Pig, huh? We're naming animals for our names nowadays, huh? You kids. And then look at the sideboard here, too. We have the Midnight Reaper. That's the card I'm talking about. I think this would be a great one in the slot, especially if you go Llanowar Elves and a Midnight Reaper. Plague Mirror is still here. Plague Crafter is also a very good card. Takes care of the Hexproof. That's one of the reasons that the Eldest Reborn. Vine Mare is huge still, and other Hexproof-based cards are still pretty big. Plague Crafter is a way to get through it. Then the Chupacabra, another Fine Finality. All right, we have this theme is very, very high. Remember that the cards have to have like 5 different ones to show up in this list, or maybe it's 10 cards. So this one's another version of a rock type strategy, good stuff, value-based deck. This one going Burglar Rat and Dust Legion Zealot to give you the early value, with Kite Slayer Freebooter to rip apart their hand, with District Guide to give you value. I don't know if I like District Guide over the Elf, though. I guess it survives the Chain Whirler or the Plague Mirror. Jadelight Ranger in this one. See, again, this one might really, really benefit from a Llanowar Elf just to ramp it up that one turn. People might be really playing around Shock and Chain Whirler, though. Then the Chupacabras and Azoni. So this one is really, really heavy on the 4-ofs, though. Cast Down, Ritual of Suit. Ritual of Suit's another incredibly good board wipe versus many, many decks. There is a lot of Boros decks running around, too, I noticed, in week 1. And Fine Finality. So you can see that Fine Finality seems to be in a ton of these decks. We have Vraska's Contempt, Deathgorger Scavenger, which I've called before, Reclamation Sage. Lots of these, those all have potential, or this has potential going up. And we have Vraska's Reclamation Sage for added value. All right, another black-green deck. This is basically just mono-green, splashing Assassin's Trophy. We've seen this deck before. Llanowar Elves, Pelt Collector, Thorn Lieutenant, Merfolk Branch for the 2-drop, and Steel Leaf Champion and Thrashing Brontodon for the 3-drop, so it has really good synergy with the Elf, and the Nullhide Ferox as the 4-drop, with Vine Mirror being the other 4-drop, trying to find the early Galta. There are a few other things you can go in this place. Stompy has more than enough options at the moment, but what we can take from this deck is Nullhide Ferox did, in fact, see a 5-0 finish right off the gate. This is the mythic. This is another mythic that I think is very, very underrated at the moment at the price tag. If anything could go up. This is a card that does seem to be wanted to be played in multiples. Especially look at the... it could definitely keep this Burglar Rat down. I don't think Burglar Rat is playable right now just because of the Nullhide Ferox. That seems really bad to go turn 2 Burglar Rat and then give your opponent a 6/6 for free. All right, so then we have this mono blue tempo deck. This one's also very, very interesting. We've seen this before. A lot of the cards rotated though, so I was wondering how well this would transition over, but it seems just to be a 1-drop in the form of Mistcloak Herald this time. It's not quite the 1/2 body that the one out of Amonkhet provided, and then a Siren Stormtamer because it has the added effect of being a wizard, and the Merfolk Trickster is also a wizard, so both these can then reduce the cost of the Wizard's Retort to just a strict counterspell. We also have the Exclusion Mage that's a wizard, and the nothing else so is a wizard. So Nightfall Sprite just to help set up future draws, and all of these cards are pretty evasive with the flying or unblockable, or then can be kind of a tempo card with tapping stuff down with Merfolk Trickster and the Exclusion Mage by bouncing it. And so then you can throw the Curious Obsession on a card and get the card advantage, followed up with other card draw like Chart a Course and other fixing, protecting your cards with Dive Down, Spell Pairs, Essence Scour. This is a great budget go-to deck. You can see the price tag of this deck is a whopping $30. The Curious Obsession, of course, could go up because it's out of Rivals of Ixalan. Same thing with the Stormtamer. Stormtamer's already gone up to a pretty high value. Merfolk Trickster is at a Dominaria, so it's the least likely one to go up in value. But we have the Tempest Djinn. This is one of the cards that I said keep your eye on for post-rotation, and right out the gates, it did get a 4 or a 5-0 finish. The sideboard is also a very big budget deck here. Just nothing of any sort of value. We got some Diamond Mare to help gain life against decks you need to do it. Nice little tempo deck. Very good shell. Of course, we have mono red. We knew this deck wasn't done for. I thought maybe it would go more of a pirate route week 1. This one seems to go definitely on the getting the Chain Whirl, Legion Warboss, and Rekindling Phoenix as just value. Also has the Captain Lunari Storm. Pretty good value here. Dismissive Pyromancer. Funny this sees play. I still don't think that this is playable. In fact, I think I'd rather have something like the Daredevil here, but who knows. This is probably one of the last cards that was just jammed into this slot. There might be some better 2-drops to throw here than the Dismissive Pyromancer. Daredevil is great. I don't know if it's main board, though, because there are a lot of decks it's just going to fall short against. But it's another card that I'm keeping my eye on, especially in humans for modern. That's where I'm really keeping my eye on it. From Rivals of Ixalan, so it's got that going for it. Experimental Frenzy in here to help and fix your deck once you've ran out of cards. Also 3 treasure maps, and you also have the nice removal package of Lightning Strike, Shock, and Lava Coil. Lava Coil I knew would start to see play. Sorcery deals 4 damage to our creature. If that creature would die, exile it. So it's a bit of an upgrade to a card. What was the card? Oh, I guess the difference between the card that existed during the Eldritch Moon, I think it was in. They did 3 damage to any target and then exile it if it were to die for 2 mana sorcery speed. So yeah, this is kind of a trade-off, but I think this is a little bit better because 4 damage is very relevant right now with the Steel Leaf Champion. So another card that could keep Steel Leaf Champion down in the future. Steel Leaf Champion used to be really good against red because it dodged all the removal spells. So keep that in mind with Lava Coil. The sideboard looks to be, this seems to be a very budget deck too if you just replace the Rekindling Phoenix. If there is a 4-drop that is, I don't know if there is one that right now that's pretty decent. There's a 3/2 haste. That's a mythic though, so don't know if that's quite where you want to be. This can also be a very good budget version. Alrighty, so then we have another red deck that tries to curve out earlier with Fanatical Firebrand, get you Lava Runner, Runaway Steamkin. This is another card that I was surprisingly good. It can get up to 4/4 very quickly for 2 mana, and then you can remove counters to ramp up. But I mean, this isn't something that I would suggest happening a lot, but there is this nice little synergy between Runaway Steamkin and Fight with Fire. So, wow, this thing seemed to spike up in value too. Yeah, crazy. That's went up from $1 to $3. Risk Factor is also in this deck. Risk Factor might be finally a version of a card like this that is playable by potentially doing either 8 damage or 4 damage in 3 cards, or just 6 cards out of 1 card, or out of 2 cards. You have to discard a card for the jump start. But this is just an all-in red deck that tries to play a bunch of ones and 2-drops early and follow it up. So this is just the Flame of Keld redone. It is missing a few good cards like the Beaumont Courier and the Mage, but nonetheless, it still does seem to function quite well. And it is a very good budget deck. Legion Warboss in the sideboard too. I think that's very, very understandable. Fight, Fire, Fire, Lava Coil. Yep, that's very, very straightforward. All right, so now we have a Doom Whisper Dream Eater deck. So this is just going to be the go-to blue-black control with the finisher being the Dream Eaters and Doom Whispers. So as a 2 Ravenous Chupacabra, we've seen this suite before with the Vraska's Contempts. We have Ritual of Suit, which is really good against clearing early boards. Sinister Sabotage is the go-to counterspell, Surveil 1. We have Thought Erasure to rip their hand out, Moment of Craving, and Cast Down to stabilize. I'm surprised there's not like not Disfigure, the Deadweight in here. I think Deadweight wants to be in to get rid of early land or else. Maybe they just don't care because they can get Ritual. And then Discovery Dispersal, which is good for the Discovery is very, very good. And if you have to use Dispersal, that's just an upside to it. One of my favorite cards in the pre-release as well. Oh yes, there's Deadweight right there. Boom. Argo's Bloodfast to continue to gain life. Disinformation Campaign has a lot of synergy with the Doom Whisper just to continue to draw cards. Yeah, I think I'd like to see a little more heavy on the Surveil. They have quite a bit of Surveil here with Thought Erasure. So it does. This will give you the ability to grind out games. I don't know if I like Disinformation Campaign. I think it's more of a sideboard card versus decks you have to grind out. But nonetheless, Blood Operative as a switcheroo against other control decks, I'm sure. Same thing with Thief of the Sanity. They bring in kind of this tempo package here. Duress, Disdainful Stroke. So what we can take from this one is Doom Whisper and Dream Eater I've started to see play. So it seems to me that Return to Ravnica is a lot more relevant than people gave it. They thought that this was going to be really Dominaria heavy going forward. And it does look like Guilds of Ravnica seems to be the set that is having the most impact. All right, so now we have a Grixis deck with Nicol Bolas as a 4 of, Dream Eater as a 3 of, Bone Dragon is even in here as a 1 of. That's all I can see, Bone Dragon. When people started speculating this, I'm like, you don't really need a bunch of them. I mean, it is a 5/4 for 5 mana. Unfortunately, Lava Coil exists. I think that's going to keep Bone Dragon down. This is a very similar removal package to when we saw Forward with Notion Rain being the card advantage. Everything besides that is pretty similar. Argo Bloodfast and Eldritch Reborn as the other ways to gain the value. So we're starting to see a lot of similarities with how the Dimir is going. So maybe this Dream Eater is the real deal. Okay, now we have we knew this deck was coming. This is a Jeskai version, Teferi with Ral. I knew exactly this is going to be a Settle the Wreckage deck. So Settle the Wreckage, Teferi still here. Surprised there's not like a 1 of Karn in here either as another alternate win condition in case this gets ripped out. Let's see if there is another alternate. You can go to the face with some damage with Deafening Clarion. And no, this does to each creature. Yeah, this is just a 3 damage to each creature. Lightning Strike, Justice Strike. Nope, that doesn't. So yeah, that is going to be your win condition is going to have to be Expansion into Explosion can win if you have just an insane amount of mana. This is the one that does damage equal to the X and you draw X cards. And the expansion, I forgot what the expansion part of it does. I think it counters a spell. Counters a spell unless they pay with Chimera Cast 4 or less, instant or sorcery. But anyway, we knew this deck was coming. Doesn't seem to have anything really too interesting here, except for maybe Ionize. That's interesting as a 4 of. They're choosing this one to be the go-to counter spell. I don't know if double blue is just really tough. That's why they decided to be between a red and a blue. But I think that Ionize would the 2 damage might not be relevant in this deck. In fact, it doesn't look relevant at all in this deck. And I'm wondering if Surveil 1 is just better than 2 damage, unless this explosion is the other win con and the 2 damage and the lightning strikes do add up. So yeah, that one's kind of weird here. I've seen another deck like this use 1,000-Year Storm and then a bunch of ops in this type of ops and anticipates as well, and then just try to win off of that and cast a bunch of cards. But this one does seem to be going with Teferi, all out Teferi. It's got Nezahal in the sideboard to break the mirrors. Same thing with these, the Lyra and Siege Gang can come in versus the mid-range decks to take over the value. And yeah, I am surprised that is there only there's 2 search for count and 1 in the sideboard. So we've seen this deck before. White Weenie has a 5/0 finish. This deck existed before with Pride of the Conquerors. Another pretty budget deck here if you don't decide to go the history of Benalia. Conclave Tribunal, by the way, is a extremely good card in this list. You can see the foil is already at $6.50. The Convoke is amazing with putting out 1-drops and 2-drops, or just a 1-drop on turn 2 and then 2 1-drops on turn, or 1-drop on turn 1, two 1-drops on turn 2, and then Conclave can then then you can Convoke and then take care of something. It's actually pretty sweet card, and then Stabilize and then Pride of the Conquerors. So it also adds toward the Pride of the Conquerors too. So keep your eye on this card. This card could definitely see a lot more play if like a Saplings list or this History list does take off. And so this is an aggro History list. I'm sure we'll see some other ones. We have a Abzan list. This one, similar to the green-black ones we saw before, it's splashing white for the Knight of Grace, thinking that black is going to be, black removal is going to be an issue, but they could be very right with the Knight of Grace. I mean, it's very tough if your removal is Ravenous Chupacabra or what's the card I'm thinking of? Vraska's Contempt. So it dodges both those, even Assassin's Trophy it dodges. So this could be a great one. It also, trades very well with, or it first strikes down a lot of the black threats. So it also gets bigger in this deck because you probably will have a black permanent out in the form of Vraska or Doom Whisper or Ravenous Chupacabra. So Knight of Autumn, we all knew this card was very flexible, a very, very quick 4/3 body if you just need it to be a 4/3, or it's just strictly better than a Reclamation Sage, or can gain some life to Stabilize. So Llanowar Elves can to ramp into it, or Thrashing Brontodon. Nice little mid-range package. This seems to be a very well-built deck. We can see Vraska's seen a lot more play than it used to. This could definitely be a card that goes up. And Vraska's Temp Assassin's Trophy is the removal package with Eldest Reborn. Can a card out of Dominaria and Uncommon go up even higher go up from bulk? We've seen a few others like the Wizard's Lightning. This could be a possible potential spec target. All right, let's hurry and wrap this up. We are the sideboard here, Carnage Tyrant in the sideboard. Yep, we saw that coming. Not a lot of surprises here. This is a nice little pelt collector in a Abzan list. So this is really trying to use both the knights. Okay, this is a knight list actually. Knight. And so there's Sister Benalia. And the collector's just nice because it probably gets bigger very quickly. It can get up to 4 with the Knight of Autumn because it enters the battlefield. Yep. No, it does not. You put... Yeah. Okay, so that's an on-bow. But still, nonetheless, it can get up to 4/4 because of Conclave Cavalier. Johnny in this one, another Shore to Assembly. Flower to Flourish, all these things. This is another one that just cantrips to find you a basic forest or plains, or otherwise late game it can be used to pump up. Assassin's Trophy seen a lot of play. Status Statue in this one as well. And we have Chalet, Lyra, Fine Finality. We're starting to see a meta happening. Even Vivian Reed seeing play. Okay, so we go off to another Abzan list. This one going with the Knight of Autumn. Again, I'm surprised that the Llanowar Elf's not in here to ramp it up when you have Jadelight Ranger and Knight of Autumn. Can you see that the Steel Leaf Champion is, at least in these two-color decks, people are deciding to go a different route. Maybe that is because it's a liability at this point with the 4 damage spell. Golgari Finebroker, Ravenous Chupacabra, very, very similar cards here. And we have Vraska's Contempts and Find and Finality. This card is seeing a ton of play. Same with Eldest Reborn. We're seeing a lot of Eldest Reborns in lists. There's 4 of in this deck. All right, White-Green. This is another fast deck trying to get Galta out with Llanowar Elf. Emera to then create more creatures that can reduce the cost of Galta. Or, one of my favorite cards, the Venerated Loxodon. This card was amazing. I think this is still one of the sleepers in the set, and it seems to have a pretty good synergy with Emera. You can, even the Convoke off Emera at least puts a 1/1. You don't get to put the counter on the 1/1, but that's pretty sweet, the synergy between Venerated Loxodon and Emera. Thorn Lieutenant, Steel Leaf Champion is in this version. I think this version probably could benefit more from going the Knight of Autumn. I just think the Knight of Autumn is strictly better at this point. I know this is a 5/4 though, maybe that's the case. But being able to put either, it's very versatile, or some sort of, at least in the sideboard, I'd like to see one in a deck like this. The Thrashing Bronton, that could be, you could go Steel Leaf Champion and the Knight. I know that maybe the mana base, nope, the mana base is fine for white. We have a Sun Petal Grove and a Temple Garden. We have the Flower to Flourish as well to help fix, and this one's still going to the Galta. So answer the Galta, answer the Steel of Champions, and even a Conclave Tribunal. So, yep, just a stompy list that splashes basically for the Loxodon and the Mara. Okay, we have another white-green list. This one is not going the Loxodon, which I think it should, when you have Sky Marcher and Amara and Shauna. And Benalish Marshal, though, is kind of that slot. However, I think I prefer the Loxodon over Benalish Marshal. The Yavimaya Sapherd, Tendershoot Dryad, and also the Song of Freyalius, History Benalia, and Conclave Tribunal with March of the Multitudes. That's the first March of the Multitudes deck we've seen so far. And just a one of Tendershoot Dryad. I really thought that this deck would definitely see play. I think the big reason that it's not is people have already found that Fine Finality is just so good versus these token-based decks. 6 mana removal is good enough for the meta. That is crazy. We have another white-green right after it with a little bit heavier on, there it is, the Venerated Loxodon and Trostani. I don't know if I like Trostani in multiples because you can't have more than one out. At least you can get 2 1/1 soldiers, though, I guess. Chalet in this one, Conclave Cavalier, Thorn Lieutenant seeing a ton of play. So far, my specs have all hit from the cards that I think are going to be going up after rotation. Pretty spot on. Yep, we've seen all of the cards that I liked. Yeah, except for the little dinosaur, which I thought was just a meta call in case a deck like this came to be. So anyway, here's a Goblins list. It's just splashing for response to Resurgence, as well as Radiant Destiny. So that's going to be the Lord for Goblins, is Radiant Destiny, and take an extra attack phase with the Resurgence, or response to another card that I really, really like, because both modes are very, very are reasonable. So Siege Gang Commander, we have the Goblin Chain Whirler, the Goblin Instigator. Doesn't have the bigger Lord, the 4-mana Lord, because Radiant Destiny comes out a turn earlier. I agree with that. This one is going a Volley Veteran. Legion Warboss here. It's surprising that maybe Fanatical Firebrand isn't the Goblin that can be sacked to give something haste. I wonder if that's just a better slot. But anyway, Vanquisher's Banner in the sideboard to give it some legs. We have another white-red. This is a deck that I saw a ton of on Arena, on the people that are actually buying cards right off the bat. This is just a Mentor-based deck. It's got the Boros Challenger to come out early, the Hunted Witness and Dauntless Bodyguard, the Cavalry Drillmaster. Usually what I've seen instead of Cavalry Drillmaster is the 2/2 First Strike Mentor one. But I mean, this is also pretty good because it can pump up a creature to then mentor something. That's pretty cool little interaction. Knight of Grace, Swiftblade Vindicator. There's the other synergy. It can give Swiftblade Vindicator a +2/+0, so attacking for 6 that turn. Tajic, insanely powerful. If you've played against Tajic, you know exactly how stupid good this card is with the Haste Mentor. Especially when it follows up an aggressive 2-drop like a Swiftblade Vindicator. That is a huge swing if you've gone like 1 and 1 into a 2 into a Tajic. And then Aurelia, very, very good card. I've seen a lot of this deck in action. It can just win out of nowhere. The Integrity to Intervention is also a very good card with the Double Striker, or a Mentor card, because you can Integrity just to pump up +2/+2. Yeah, that feels weaker than like a Giant Growth a lot of times, but the ability to then switch into an Intervention when it needs to be something bigger, to be a Lightning Helix, pretty solid card. Legion's Landing, History Benalia, Conclave Tribunal. We're seeing a lot of similarities with other decks. This looks like another red deck wins. A little bit of a Goblin. Nope, we saw this one already. Very similar. This one's just going into Siege Gang Commander. But Dismissive Pyromancer. This is the second time we've seen copies of Dismissive Pyromancer. Let's go to another white-red list. This looks like it's Knights, though. A little bit of a Knight theme with History Benalia. Has Lightning Strike. And the Deafening Clarion. This doesn't have... I was expecting to see that whenever it's dealt damage, deals that much damage to opponent card, but it's not. Just Lyra, Chalet, Aurelia. So a little bit of a... Nope, this is more of an Angels/Knights theme. Yeah, it's mainly a little bit of into just a nice little white-red, more mid-range. And another red deck wins, very similar to the ones we've seen. This one was a little heavier on the spells with a Jaya Ballard and a Sarkon. To be able to ramp out the Varix Bladewing and the Demanding Dragon. But we're starting to see Runaway Steamkin see a lot of play. And Yeah. Another white-red. This one is another more mid-range, so it's kind of conceding the 1-drop in favor of a bigger 2-drop package. Don't know how I feel about that with Tajic. I think Tajic, you need to have a 1-2-3 punch. This is definitely going more on the mid-range with the Resplendent Angel, and then into Rekindling Phoenix Lyra. Very susceptible. This deck seems extremely susceptible to board wipe, though. And then there is History Benalia, though. So again, lots and lots of History Benalias. Lots of overlap between these decks. Now we have another white-red that seems to be on the quicker. Again, this is the deck I saw the most of. There's the Legion War Boss, the Goblin Banneret. Yep, this is the one I saw a ton of this Mentor-based deck. Curving with Tajic, Aurelia, Rekindling Phoenix, and the Integrity and Lightning Strike and Legion Landing. We even have a Huatli Warrior Poet in the sideboard. And there we have our go-to blue control. We knew this was going to happen. Sell the Wreckage, Cleansing Nova. This is just finding the cards that replace the cards that rotated out. This is still a Search for Azcanta with Teferi as the win con. There is no other win cons in this deck except for Teferi. If Teferi gets exiled, at least if they don't bring in another win con, there is no win con in this deck. Yep, there isn't at all. So they have to bring in something like History Benalia or Lyra and Nezahal if that is the case of actually getting through. So there you go. We have the Do Nothing deck Teferi deck. Another Dryad deck. This one looks like it's splashing. It's a mid-range pressure green deck with Jadelight Ranger, Knight of Autumn, Lyra, Chalet, and just using Karn and Teferi as the value planeswalkers. March of Multitude, Urza's Ruining Blast. This just seems to be all over the place, but I like it. Even a Mox Amber in here because of Amera to ramp out early. Amera, Chalet, Lyra, Teferi, and Karn. I don't know if that's enough to really make Mox Amber worthwhile, but yeah, that's fine. Conclave Tribunal, History of Benalia again. So let's go back and overall just do a little bit of a summary. I know this video is incredibly long. Let's go over to decks, format, staples, and most card in standard. Nope, we need to go to the tournament. How you do it is you come over here to decks, metagame, and then you click on this and it will have the most played cards. So if you look right at the bat, it looks like History of Benalia, which was our #1 pick, was the most dominant card at 39 copies. We also have I'm surprised that we didn't have the Fine Finality in here. Conclave Tribunal is #2. Lyra is #3. I think maybe a lot of the white-red decks, though, did register because they were slightly different enough to hit. Yeah, look at all these white-reds. Whereas the black-greens might have been too closely related to each other. And so this one thing I don't like about how when Wizards hides their data is it gives an unclear picture. It's looking like white-red might be the most dominant, but we don't know. It gives us an overall sense that mid-range is the go-to strategy, which means that standard games are probably pretty fun to play. Again, we don't know how many Teferi decks actually made 5-0 because it could probably only show one, because Teferi, there's not a lot of, well, actually Teferi decks, there sometimes is a lot of wiggle room to mess around with cards, but only one of the strictly blue-white and none of the Turbo Fogs. So that's very, very interesting. Knight of Grace, still Chain Whirlers up there, Assassin's Trophy, Rekindling Phoenix. We knew these cards, just a lot of the high impact cards. Looks like a very value, good stuff based standard. Why I like these standards? Yes, I typically don't like playing these decks because they're too boring. I am not a good stuff player. Sorry, Talmage. That's not my cup of tea. I like to play a lot more synergy related, a lot more of a little bit of a combo streak. Like something has to have a theme besides just good stuff. But the good news is usually combo or synergy, the decks I like to play, this is the absolute best case scenario. Combo, my synergy decks get broken apart mainly by two things, aggro and control. And when there's this big mid-range type environment, whoo boy, I can go crazy with some of my more janky combos. So this should seem to be a very, very fun meta to play with. There's our Fine Finality there. And I hope this video was some good information. I'm going to have a good wrap up every week over at my second channel, Rogue Market. I do what's called the Rogue Market Recap. So in the link in the description below, I think I'll even pin a comment probably. I'll have that link to that video. So I'm going to give you 10 cards from week 1 that I really, really like for moving in the meta. So be looking for that video. I don't know if I'm going to be more focused on the Guilds of Ravnica or just the week 1 meta. So be looking for that video sometime late tonight. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.